So, Mr. Messore, thank you very much for joining me. As you know, start times are a very contentious issue here in Barrington and at this school, but you're here to explain the move, correct?
Correct.
All right, so I wanted to start off by asking, is it official? Will the start times be changing next year?
So the question is this actually going to happen? And the answer is yes, it is. The planning for the implementation of this change to school schedule is embedded in next year's 2019-2020 school budget. So we've already allocated money in order to put forth for the change of the school schedules next year.
Who made this decision and when was it made?
So this discussion actually started about 2010, before I was even in the position I'm in right now. There was a recommendation from a subcommittee of the school committee, which is the Health and Wellness Committee, to look through scientific research and medically recommended start time to take place in the schools going back as far as about 2011. So forums actually took place at that time, and there was some discussions across town, and there was this discussion and actually I think a budgetary allotment to begin start time back in 2011. So we've had the discussion since then. It's going to the school committee on 2 other occasions, I think back in 2016 and 2014, both times being postponed. And with a newly elected school committee who's focused on changing the school schedules for the health and wellness of our students through medically researched, and also we looked at it as an alignment for our K-5 teachers in professional development and starting our elementary school students at the same time in the morning.
So, still, some students feel that they were left out in the decision-making process. So how can they make their thoughts better represented in the future?
Well, we've heard student voice going back to 2011 when we held some public forums. In 2016, there was a start time ad hoc committee that was formed with representation from school committee, myself, parents, educators, and we had 2 students that had applied to be on the committee. And their role was to gather student voice at that point and bring their input into the study that we did to see whether or not we could, well, it's not whether or not, we actually developed a plan to implement start time in 2016. We've had various communications from students, and I reached out to students when I'm in the schools. My suggestion to students when it comes to voicing their opinions on initiatives would be, 1, meeting with your building principal, I think is always the best way to start that conversation. As a superintendent, I'm open to communication from students or being invited to speak to them. Regarding reaching out to the school committee, I think that can be done either by emailing school committee members or attending public meetings. So there are opportunities for voice, and then there are opportunities that a district has to make decisions of what they feel is in the best interest of students and staff, and then they commit themselves to making that decision.
All right, well, thank you. Now let's take a turn into the implications of the start time change, which is coming next year. So can you explain the overall benefits of pushing the start time back to?
Well, obviously the medically recommended start for students of this age group and secondary students is at 8:30. Figuring that students need between 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night, and knowing with your course load and social schedule and extracurricular activities, that probably a targeted time for sleep is between probably 11 o'clock and 12. So when you look at the 8:30 start time, it sort of meets that, at least the minimal of the 8 hours sleep. So that's the major benefit for us as a district. The other benefit is going to a 2-tier bus system, is to align the the K-5 schools together, so they will relatively start at the same time, just like the middle school and high school does now. This provides us better opportunity for professional development among our elementary school teachers, and finally eliminates the late start of Hampton Meadows, which is 8:50 to 3:20, if you remember those days.
Yeah, of course I remember those days. Clearly there are benefits with the sleep and benefits for the district, but are there any drawbacks that come with this as well?
I don't think there's any drawbacks. In talking to districts throughout Massachusetts and Maine who have years ago implemented changes to their school schedules, the quantitative data that comes back from them is mostly like, is there an improvement in academic scores? Moderate. What they've seen a major change in is in the school climate. And if that's an opportunity for improvement in our school districts, then I'm in full support of that.
All right, so moving on a little bit, an ENN News survey of 52 students here found that 71% of them fall asleep at a later time than they do right now before CPT nights, when we're allowed to come in 55 minutes later than normal. So what's to say that this won't happen once we push the start times back next year every night?
All right, well, it's a sampling of 1,100 students.
Yes.
So I would say that, is there a tendency that they could stay up later? It could be. I don't know what late is for a typical high school student. Mine are long gone and out of college at this point, so I don't really recall the hours. But I know that students that are heavily engaged in either athletics or activities and then carry a rigorous course load, usually at some point in time, probably before midnight, are ready to call it a night. I know others do stay up late, and at least starting later in the morning affords that opportunity to at least get another hour's sleep.
All right, thank you. So another concern raised about the start time change over the past few years is that it will affect sports teams. Some teams are afraid that they won't be able to secure practice facilities and are worried that their games will be affected. Is there any solution to this?
So, especially going back to 2016 and working on the committee report that we provided to the school committee on school scheduling, we spent an extensive amount of time in athletics. So my last report to the school committee talked about ice hockey and what the impact was of a later start time or a 3 o'clock end time for the high school. And Mr. Finn identified probably 4 practices out of 30 that he'd probably have to reschedule, keeping most of them close to the ice time that you already have slotted, and potentially just a couple of adjustments he'll have to make. As far as girls hockey is concerned, there were no conflicts of ice time as far as losing ice time for girls practice. Swim, we made some adjustments. We know that it was important to keep 5 lanes open for swim with at least an hour and a half practice. So we've secured 4 days a week for swim at those scheduled times, maybe just a shorter time on Friday. The adjustment might be that 2 days a week will be at 3:30 and 2 days a week might be at 7:30 at night.
Are those the main sports?
Yeah, we've looked at everything, track and field. We looked at all sports. Mr. Finn didn't see a major impact on scheduling of competition. Obviously, there'll have to be some adjustments in practice times, but he didn't see that as a major obstacle. The only other piece that we're looking at is JV and varsity sports to play back-to-back, and we may have to make some scheduling adjustments that they may play on separate days versus traveling together, and that's part of the logistics that we're still working out.
All right, thank you. Now, my last question, not everyone obviously plays the sport here, but everyone is looking for a good education, and a University of Washington study regarding start times found that there is a correlation between better grades and a later start time. However, some students are concerned that if their teachers aren't available after school, that will outweigh the benefits that come with this change.
That's a good question. I've looked into that quite a bit also. One thing that we're very lucky about being in Barrington Public Schools is we have the best teachers in the state, if not the country, and a very dedicated staff. So obviously this will probably be an impact on teaching schedules, and what I'm looking at is that, one, I know they're professionals, so working with students is something that they're dedicated to doing. Some might be after school, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of the scheduled extra help sessions are before school, just like they are now. I know some students come to school at 7 a.m. for extra help, and some are here, well after 2:30 for extra help. So I think as we go through the adjustment of the schedule, we'll have to look at how we adjust to supporting our students.